Okay, in this video we're going to have a look at the structure of an important group of organic molecules called lipids. And we know a little bit about lipids. We know they're fat and oil and those sorts of things. We may even know a bit about them being involved in the cell membranes in the phospholipid bilayers. Now, lipids are an important molecule that they're complex. They're a big molecule. But then they're not what we refer to as being a polymer. They are made up of lots of units, but these units aren't organised in a big chain. Okay, so let's have a look at these a bit further. Okay, let's start off by having a look at an example of a lipid, and these are phospholipids. These are what forms that phospholipid bilayer that makes up cell membranes. These being a large component, of course, they're not the only thing there. They have, like a lot of lipids, they have these fatty acid tails down here, and they're the bits that are hydrophobic, or they move away from water, and they have a polar head. So they have one end that's liking being in water and one end that's non-polar or hydrophobic and not wanting to be in the polar water molecules. They have a glycerol structure, and the fatty acid tails like a lot of our lipids. And the ones that make up the cell membrane also have this phosphate component to them, and they're called phospholipids, and they're probably the one we need to know the most about and learn the most about. Okay, so water-loving head and water-repelling tails. We also see this in other structures, and this is just an example of another one. And we have the glycerol backbone and some fatty acid tails. And these fatty acid tails can be organised in different ways. Sometimes we say they're saturated and they have lots and lots of these hydrogen molecules, and sometimes they're unsaturated. They have a few less hydrogen molecules, and they also have some double carbon bonds in there. So this glycerol backbone and the fatty acid tails, they're the things that really give the lipid molecules and lipids as a whole their property. Lipids can form that barrier with water, or they can sit on top of water. So let's just have a look at the molecules involved in a lipid here. And what we can see is again, lots of carbons, lots of hydrogens, making it organic. But we can only see a few oxygens, and that's really reflected in the ratios that we see. If we said we had n number of carbon atoms, what we might find is that we have roughly 2n for the number of hydrogen atoms. What we do see now, though, is this number of oxygen atoms is a lot less. So, for example, if we had about 30 carbon atoms, we'd expect, around about 60 hydrogen atoms. But we might have a lot less. This might be 5 or 10 sort of oxygen atoms, depending on the actual type of lipid that we have. So let's just have a quick look at these phospholipids. They'll be the most common sort of lipid that we're dealing with. Look at them lining up in our bilayer. The water-loving heads, the hydrophilic heads on the water side of the cell membrane, and the hydrophobic tails hanging out together in the middle, away from the water. And in a cell membrane, the cell membrane is a lot more complex. It has proteins, it has glycoproteins, has cholesterol holding it together, and it's a whole nother structure. It's not just as simple as creating this phospholipid bilayer. But what we can see in this phospholipid bilayer in either picture is that it's not a single chain of molecules like in a polymer. It's more of a sea of molecules hanging out together, all orientated the same way. And that's where a lipid isn't really like our other organic molecules. It's not a polymer. It's not a chain of molecules joined together. Okay? But however, it is a complex and large organic molecule. Okay, good luck with studying lipids. I'm sure you'll revisit them a little when you start looking at cell membranes. Okay, good luck.